and welcome to Made with Love. I'm Meike Beck and I'm the Cookery Director of Good Housekeeping, and we're here at the Good Housekeeping Institute, which is fully springed up. And I can't wait to share with you our love letter to cooking and to you, our readers. As we're approaching Easter, I thought the best thing to be showcasing would be a lovely hot cross bun. But it's not a normal bun as you might find them, it is a loaf. I personally love hot cross buns toasted and slathered with butter, so I figured that in a loaf form, there's more surface area to slather and toast. It's not complicated. I'll talk you through any worries there might be, and we'll end up with something that's absolutely impressive and amazing to share on the day. If you want to give this hot cross bun loaf a go, and why wouldn't you? It looks incredible. You can find the recipe on our website. A lot of bread making recipes start with warming a liquid, and we get a lot of reader questions saying, why is this? It's simply because we are feeding the yeast, and it needs three things to thrive. We need it to create its air bubbles. It does that by eating the carbohydrate and creating carbon dioxide. Those bubbles are trapped in the bread mesh and give it a lovely bouncy texture. For yeast to start growing, it needs a liquid, it needs food, which is often a little bit of sugar you add to a recipe, or honey, and it needs some warmth, which is when it starts rising. So the warming of the liquid at the first place helps the yeast to get on with it and start making those bubbles that we need. So for our hot cross bun loaf, we're starting with warming some milk and water into which we're going to melt the butter. This is what's known as an enriched loaf, because a simple bread loaf is just flour, water and yeast. We are making it more tender. We're making it slightly more cake-like with the addition of egg and butter. So you can use all milk. We're lightening it up slightly with a bit of water. So milk and water into a pan to scald it, or just until you see some small bubbles around the edge. Right, our milk and water mixture is scalded, tiny bubbles around the outside and steaming. So we're going to turn the heat off and add our, blue or natural. Let's go with blue for spring. Add our butter. We just need it to melt, and then we want it to cool to tepid blood temperature. Easiest way to check, stick your finger in it. If you don't feel it, it's blood temperature. So set that aside to do its thing. So while our liquid is cooling, we're going to get on to one of the nitty-gritties of bread making, and that's which flour you use. Recipes usually state a strong white flour, either brown or white. We're using white today, and it's strong because it's got a higher protein content, which will create a better gluten structure. And we had a lovely question from Oscar on Instagram, who is starting his baking journey, and he said, why do I see all these different types of yeast? You're absolutely right. There are three main types of yeast. There's a baker's or a fresh yeast, which is like a crumbly clay putty, quite hard to get hold of, but you can pester your supermarket bakery section. They might give you some. There's a dried yeast, which is in a little canister, and there's a fresh, dried, active yeast, which are the sachets, which I can never rip neatly, but that's another issue. They all do the same thing. They all create a lovely rise in your bread, but they do it in different volumes. You need a third less of a dried, fast action than you do of fresh. The only thing that can really go wrong, Oscar, is that your yeast is dead. You need to make sure it's living before you start all your bread-making endeavours. The way to check that with a dried yeast or a dried fast action is really just by the best before date. That's a quality control. It's not going to go unsafe after that, but it's going to be at its best potential. Within date, it's probably fine. If it's outside the date, do give it a little check, give it a little sugar, give it a little tepid water, stir it in a little bowl and leave it for 10 minutes. If it's bubbly, add it to your recipe. It's fine to use. It's alive. It's living. If it's not bubbly, your yeast is dead, stop the recipe. Another key component of bread making is, of course, kneading. The kneading is what gets that gluten irritated and creates that nice, long mesh that's needed to catch the air bubbles. You can do this by hand and manual labour, but why would you bother when you've got this fabulous KitchenAid in a nice lemon sherbet colour, that's what I'd call it anyway, and this has come out as a whopping 97 out of 100 in our Good Housekeeping Institute tests. It is mega, it's on many people's wish lists. I got one for my wedding 15 years ago. It's still going. They are fantastic. It does all the heavy lifting for you. I can go off and have a cup of tea while it's kneading, and I'll come back to a lovely smooth dough. So let's get cranking. In goes our strong flour. And then we're going to add our dried yeast, some salt, and mixed spice. What's a hot cross bun without mixed spice? We've got about 2 teaspoons in here. You can ramp it up or down as you need. It won't really affect the yeast. But what does is your salt. So even if you like salt, don't put too much in. It will slow down its rising. So in go those flavours. And we're going to add a bit of sugar as well. And a quick mix. And now in goes the liquid to get that yeast motivated to put some energy in. We've got our room temperature buttermilk water mix and an egg. The egg, of course, is enriching the dough even more so it's going to be that lovely cakey crumb that we're after for this loaf. Do check that this is not too hot, because anything too hot will kill your yeast. And yeah, yeast dies, because I know you're interested, between 55 and 60 degree temperature. So we don't want this to be that hot, because it will just keel over in the bowl. So in it goes, nice and warm, and lovely mixer, do the work for me. Let the kneading commence. And the way to check if your dough is ready, which people are often kind of wondering, is you get a floury finger and you press it on your dough. And if it pings back up quickly, I was taught like a baby's bottom, then it's ready to go onto the rising stage. If it kind of stays reluctantly in a dimple, keep on kneading because you're developing that gluten. Without it, you don't get that bouncy, bouncy bread that we're after. You see, it's not sticky anymore. It's delightful to handle. One of my true pleasures is handling dough. Get a floury finger and poke it in. You see, it springs back quickly. It doesn't stay in like a reluctant dimple. It's good to go for its rise. So now we need that yeast to start doing its business and creating those air bubbles in the gluten structure, told you I liked science, that we've created by kneading. So get a nice little pretty tea towel, dangling it over, so into a nice warm place until it's doubled in volume. Good news, our yeast is alive, it's done its thing, nice and poofy. And at this stage, we now start wedging in some flavour. And for our hot cross buns, that is of course dried fruit. We've got a lovely jumbo raisin medley. Good word that, medley, not used enough. And we've got some nice dried cranberries for colour and to add a bit of tartness to balance the sugar. So now we come to what is known as punching back. I did once get a question of like, why is it so violent? Literally what we want to do is knock out the air. We've got irregular air bubbles in there. The yeast is having a party. We want to even out the texture, get the big bubbles redistributed and mix in our flavourings. You shouldn't need to flour your surface. It shouldn't be too sticky at this stage. Use whatever technique you want to get these in. I'm going with a twist and squidge. You'll hear loads of air bubbles popping while you do it. That is totally what you want. It will even out that final bread crumb. So as soon as you've mixed in your dried fruit, it's onto the shaping. We've got a nice greased 2-pound, 900-gram loaf tin with butter. You can line it with baking parchment. A lot of recipes call for that. But we're wanting the sides to go as toasty brown as possible, and the butter helps sizzle the dough a little bit more. So we're wanting to divide our dough into 8 equal pieces. Of course, I bring out a set of scales to do that. You can, of course, just divide it into 8 without being so controlling, but I like to have nice even balls and then divide it up into 8 hot cross buns. And now we're just going to make them into balls. This is always the disaster of hot cross buns. If you see a piece of fruit poking out the top, get rid of them. They're just going to burn. You can create a nice little claw with your hand and create some tension on the dough, and it should end up as a nice ball again. So shape all your 8. And then we're going to fit them into our greased dish. So it is a bit of a squeeze, We're just trying to lay them in the bottom of the tin. Get them nice and cozy. If you can't be bothered to make them into balls, because ultimately it's just for a bit of a aesthetic appeal, you can just make one long sausage shape and shove it in there. It's going to be just as delicious either way. Will save you a bit of time, a bit of faff. And it's now ready for its second rise, which in the bread baking world is known as a prove. The bubbles have been knocked down. We should get a nice, even concentration of them. We want the balls to just be peaking above the top of the tin, and then they'll be ready to bake. I don't love using cling film for bio reasons, but at this stage, it's the best thing. We want it airtight, greased, butter side down, over the top, so that it doesn't get a crusty top to our balls that we've worked so hard to make nice and smooth, and then ready for the next rise. Our loaf has had its second rise, but you guys all know that's called prove now, don't you? And it's beginning to peak above the top of the tin. Despite being measured, one is being slightly reluctant to do its job, but it's very puffy now. If you wanted to test if it's ready, you can get a floured finger and then poke it in an unobtrusive spot. And if it kind of stays in, so the opposite of when it's well kneaded, it's ready to go. We're now going to make our crosses for the top of our buns. So we're just looking for enough water to give it a thick and smooth but pipeable consistency. Slop it in there. You pesky raisin off, because he'll burn. And then we're going to cut a small hole. And then it's just a lovely case of piping on your crosses. Most satisfying. And now into a hot oven. The reason it has to be hot is because we want to create that final burst of steam for our little friends, the yeast, to do their final thing and give it a quick rise, but then we want to kill it. Bit morbid. We want the yeast to die and then it to start crisping up. Nice hot oven. If it's not hot, the only thing that's going to go wrong is your bread is going to be more dense. So we want to lift and then a set, and that's what we're going to now. We're baked and ready, and it smells incredible, a nice deep golden. Don't be tempted to take it out too soon. And we often get asked, how do you know when it's done? Because you can't really tell other than colour. One way is to stick a thermometer into it, and for a bread you want to be between 88 and 99 degrees centigrade, on the lower end of that scale if it's an enriched loaf like this is. The old school, easier way, if you ask me, is to pat the bottom. Talking about babies' bottoms and bread bottoms here quite a lot. Sorry about that. Needs to sound like a nice bass drum when you pat it, which it does. So it's ready to cool. Don't be tempted to put it back in your tin. It's done its job. You want to cool it on a wire rack so that it doesn't sweat. And you want to let it cool completely to room temperature. And don't be too impatient here, because I know it's super tempting to slice into it while it's just a little bit warm, but the bread inside will glue down and you won't be able to recover it. I've done it so many times, had my mum shout at me so many times, it's not worth it. Give it the time it deserves to come completely to room temperature. And then I'm going to toast it and have it with a cup of coffee. And as this is a enriched dough, it should be a very fine kind of, smells so good, cakey crumb. For me, ready for toasting and slathering with butter, but also delicious to eat as it is for breakfast or afternoon tea, anytime you'd stuff your face with a hot cross bun, quite frankly. My slice is toasted. The mixed spice is wafting. I'm incredibly excited to now taste all our hard work. And it wasn't that tricky, was it? So good. Should be a highlight of your Easter time, and it's really easy to do, and there's not many things that can go wrong. So good luck and enjoy. Delicious with a coffee.